coming out of college, business major, was interviewing a few different places and decided to potentially interview with a startup. Just so happened the name of that startup was Quest Talent Solutions, and the owner was my dad.
Welcome back to Talent Hunters, powered by MRI Network, where each week we talk with the world's top talent strategists and executive recruiters. If you want to build talented teams that drive your company to big goals and big growth, then this podcast is for you. And now, let's join the conversation with today's episode of Talent Hunters.
Okay, so let's get this thing started. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm with Gordon and Drew Schmidt, the leaders of Quest Talent Solutions located in Cumming, Georgia. They started their business in 2017. Welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Oh my gosh, I'm anxious to learn about you guys. I really am. And Gordon, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what led you to get into the recruiting?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent 30 years, a little over 30 years in retail. And, I've always said, I don't think I chose retail. I think retail chose me. And, once it's in your blood, it's just in your blood. And there were so many things, whether it be, the action-packed day to no day is the same to, I think we moved 12 times. By the time Drew was in second grade, he had lived in 6 houses. So we had wonderful opportunities to spend just in, multiple organizations and in locations. But the thing that just continued to bubble to the top, and when I got to the point in my career where I was ready to do something for myself, right? So ready to build an organization and kind of look to leave that legacy, there were two things that kept coming to the top of the yellow pages, which as you take your notebook and you write down the pros and cons, the two things that were the most consistent for me was, number one, around the people part, the development, the coaching, the training, the engaging, seeing that spark in someone's eye as they come across and they get it, the light bulb goes on. So that was number one. Number two was the problem solving. I'm kind of hey, let's get the puzzle, throw the top of the box away and figure this thing out. And then once I figured out what was going to fuel me until the end of my career, I started to look for arenas that I could do it on a daily basis so it didn't feel like work. And that's how I landed in recruiting.
Wow. Now, do you have in mind when you started this business that you were going to have really hard at it?
No, not really. This was one where I really started with that blank sheet of paper and had no idea where I thought it would go. I didn't realize, I started just me, right? Me and a laptop, and, all of a sudden things started to get a little bit bigger and we started to get some traction, and Drew was at a point in his life where he could give me some hours. And really, that's how it started. I'm like, I need some help until you figure out what you want to do. And so we didn't plan it this way. It just happened a little more organically, but, from my standpoint, it's been phenomenal.
That's great to hear. So, Drew, what inspired you to jump on board and begin with your dad?
Sure. So really coming out of college, business major, right about the time in 2017 is when he started the company. I was graduating college, was interviewing a few different places and decided to potentially interview with a startup. Just so happened the name of that startup was Quest Talent Solutions, and the owner was my dad. So it really made the leap there. As he mentioned, really just first couple years, it was more on a part-time basis, still trying to figure out recruiting, what I wanted to do, what the business was going to look like. And 7 years later, still here, still cranking away. We are figuring out the way to do things one day at a time and loving every minute of it.
So this next question is a little bit for open. I mean, whoever wants to jump on board, please do. You guys started in 2017 and the economy was recovering from the bank stuff a few years before that. I mean, it was a good time to start, really. And 2.5 years later, 3 years later, we go into COVID. That impacted you guys.
Yeah, Drew, I'll start and then let you jump in. But, we had some open discussions, very frank discussions with a couple of team members that we had at that point. And so we did a complete shift, because the question is, what do you do? If we're calling clients, they're just telling us, have you not watched the news? And, so you appear to be irrelevant or just disillusioned. So we started calling clients going, listen, we are here to help. We know what's going on. We're not, we haven't turned the TVs off. We get it. But how can we help? How can we help with displaced employees? How can we help them feel better about building resumes? How can we feel better about teaching them how to interview? How can we help them understand how to use video? Because now we all use Zoom and Teams, but at that point, people were still trying to figure out how to set it up and what it looked like, and they'd never done a Zoom interview. So we really shifted from here's what we do, we recruit, client development, business development, to we're here to help. And we took a total investment into this will pay off at some point, because we're just going to pay it forward. And we're going to pay it forward as long as we can. And we really never stopped.
Yeah, and branching off that, something that Gordon always shares with conversations, no matter who it is, it's a deposit now, right? We deposit. And in the end, if something does come out of it, a job wreck or, a new client, that's fantastic, but we don't do it for that. We do it because we just like to help. And that's really Gordon's point is, hey, we're going to do whatever we can. If it's resume review, like he said, the Teams, that was a big one. There were many times where I hopped on and, hey, the camera's pointed, half your face is cut off. The things that you don't really think about, but make a big impact when you're interviewing with the hiring manager. So that's really what we tried to do, is just help any way possible.
And then things started getting better. Now, you guys focus on a lot of different areas, not just the retail area. What else do you focus on?
It's retail is certainly probably the bulk of our business. But however, we do dabbled in sports and entertainment, supply chain distribution. We've really found that, Vince, once we get in with an organization, we feel we have a pretty good process to where clients keep coming back. And that's something we're extremely proud of. We have a 70% client return rate, which again, just I think goes to show that once we get in, once we show our process, but not only our process, our flexibility as well, our clients tend to enjoy that. And that's what keeps them coming back, I believe.
So, Gordon, let me ask you something. That it's great to hear that you guys diverse a little bit, but Drew refers to your process. And what I found in my experience is that once you learn the basics of this business, you may specialize in, for instance, the retail industry. But what it comes out is you can just about do any industry spur of the moment as long as you stay true to that process. So, Gordon, walk me through in the Reader's Digest version, what is your process when you contact a new company or a new company to contact you?
And it's, one of the first questions you always get is, what's your fee? So we kind of push that to the side until we, understand what the role is. But then the second question is normally, what's your specialty? And so, Vince, my answer to this has been listening. And then I stop, and then I pause. And people are like, no, really, like, what's your specialty? And I'm like, that's it. We listen. We listen first. And so we developed this tagline where it's culture focused, talent driven. That's who we are. So we're going to get to know your culture first. And if we don't think we can help your culture, then we'll tell you. But we want to understand the culture so we know what types of candidates to bring to you, because not every, if it's an uber competitive organization and we bring someone who is an individual contributor who's passing, even though they have the skill set, they're never going to fit. And so our process begins with just listening. And we've taken an intake meeting. We started with a small group of questions that we had about the company, but now we've adapted it and evolved it over the course of years to more about the culture and what makes people tick. And tell me about your most successful employee and why are they the most successful? Tell me about the person who you have a question mark about and what does that look for? So we can build our interview questions when we're talking to candidates about the individual company. It's not about, checking your use Chat GPT to come up with 3 questions that everyone asks and then go from there. It's really more specific into the organization and what would make them successful. Now, we still look for reasons for people, and we still look for reasons that people would be a good fit. And our process is not, there's not anything earth-shattering about our process. It's just that we stick to it. But it's, we are true hunter. And we want to make sure that we're taking good matches. Now, we maybe over-communicate a little bit with our clients. We make sure that they understand where we are. We may overshare a little because part of what we believe in is just that integrity piece. We're going to tell you the good and the bad. We're going to tell you what we think. And, there's been times where we said, hey, we're going to pull this client. They're pull this candidate. There's been times that we've gotten rid of clients because it just wasn't a good fit for us or good fit for them. It's not always them. Sometimes it's us.
Boy, couldn't agree with you more. Drew, you started your career here working in internet research, and you went to project coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were focused on the candidates.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do to earn trust from those candidates?
Yeah. I really just think it's asking questions and listening. Not to go off what Gordon said, but it's really listening and figuring out their best interest. Again, to Gordon's point, culture focused, talent driven, it rings through all of our brains, on a daily basis. What I tell clients or candidates, all the time is we want to make sure it's a good fit for you as well for our client, because it does us no good if we place them in and we're redoing the search in 2 months. So that's the big thing, is listening, really figuring out what it is they're looking for in their next role, and then matching it. And if it's with our current opening, great. If it's not, we have an impact player to go market to.
Wow, that's beautiful. So, Gordon, how do you evaluate knowing that you can trust a client?
Yeah, I think part of it's time, right? So we don't want to have any preconceived notions, but you begin to learn very quickly when you're speaking with candidates and you share who your client is. Sometimes the unsaid becomes, speaks volumes or you get the subtleties of, or I was hoping it wasn't them, or, so there are those pieces. And I think part of it is sometimes it's a turnaround situation. Sometimes it is a matter of just delivery. But I think that, with our clients, we really do believe in that transparency. And we'll tell them when we're stuck. And we'll tell them, hey, listen, we feel like we've run our course. You may need to either try someone else, or we may need to adapt this, or we need to adjust this, or let me tell you what the candidates are seeing when we're talking to them. So it's just dialogue. And Vince, to me, it's, it's adult to adult conversation. And it's just having to know, some things are not always, what people want to hear, but sometimes they have to hear it. And sometimes they have to tell us what we don't want to hear. But this is an adult business, and it requires us to listen twice as much as we talk, but also be aware of our limitations. And so that's where we've tried some of the specialties, the engineering, the specialty IT. We're not very good at that. And that's what we tell people. Hey, listen, we just don't speak that language. Now, we'll give it a shot. Here's what we'll do. We're going to ask you a lot more questions than you need to know, like what does that mean and what does that entail, and tell me more. And we'll do our research and we'll give it a shot. But we try to let people know, hey, listen, I'd love to have it, but I may have someone that can help you better.
It is all around asking the questions, because if you truly listen to the answers, like you guys are experts at, if you listen to the answers, it just feeds you more questions to be able to ask to get to know them and what they want to do. Great job. Great job. So since COVID, things obviously are taking off very well. What's your biggest challenge on trying to scale your business going forward?
You know, and I love the fact that you said scale, because it's not always grow your business, right? You can grow your business by adding people, adding recruiters, that type of thing. And so it is about scaling the business and make sure that the profits flow all the way to the bottom line, so that we can be around for our team, so that we have sustainability, so that we can continue to do good work. And as we evaluate our business, and, you know, we're pretty self-critical in this as well. And there were a couple things that really came to light. Number one is we have to somehow find an entrance into the contract staffing business. And so we're currently interviewing for a contract staffing business development person, so that they can come in and eliminate some of the ebb and flow that you see with perm placement. The second thing was we needed to really tighten up our processes, and not just our process for recruiting, but its process for measuring metrics, or when to adapt metrics, or what do our meetings look like. And we're in full deep dive into the EOS system and what that brings. So that's been a huge win for us. But the third thing for me is, how do I get it out of my head and on paper? Because intuitively, there are things that I do that, to Drew's credit, he'll go, wait a minute, why are we doing this? And because I've skipped 3, 4, and 5 with him and went from problem to solution without explaining why. So there's been a big focus on that over the last year that we have to continue, so that this has to be a sustainable business for it to be good. And so what happens when I'm not here? And that could be because I choose not to be here, or something happens. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so for that, we just need to be prepared.
Contract staffing is a huge, huge business, and it is completely different than the perm placement. I'm right there with you. Many times I tried to consider getting into it, but there was never the personal commitment to make it happen. All on me, seriously. The thing that I admired, had a good friend, Dale Gilliam. I don't know if you remember him or not. He made a commitment to get into a contract staffing business. And he literally went out there and spent the money to recruit a contract staffing manager from somebody and brought them in. And within probably 12 to 18 months, his business just took off like a rocket, because he didn't try to profess to know both business, because they're completely different. As much as we think it's the same thing, hey, set up an interview, let it go from there. Contract staffing is, you got a couple of days, 3 days, less than a week to fill the position. Perm placement, you got 3 weeks to run through a process, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. So it's a completely different animal out there. It really is. So stay true, but find somebody that has been through the battle, that is extremely successful at it. And
that's great advice. And did you say Dale from Spokane?
yes, Dale from Spokane. Very, very good friend.
It is so funny you say that. Drew and I are having breakfast with Dale and Tony tomorrow. They're in Atlanta visiting family, and so we're having breakfast with them tomorrow. He was part of our early mentor, Dale and Tony both.
Oh my gosh. I mean, be sure to milk him dry tomorrow in regards to how to get into this thing the right way. They did it right. They really, really did it right. And I admire them so much for what they've done in their business. Now they travel all over the world. God bless them. Where do you go from this point, Gordon? I understand Drew is heir apparent, but where do you go in helping that business grow through your vision of day to day?
Yeah, that's it. The thing that Drew and I talk about quite often is that it's time for me to start working on the business, not in the business. And so I currently work a desk, still do client development, still find new clients. And while that will continue, there has to be dedicated time for me to work on a business. What does the structure look like? What do the processes look like? How do we know we're being successful within the processes? When do we need to reevaluate? When is our team the right place? So it's a big part of just the vision of the company. So where do we want to be in 3 years? How do we get there? Let's trace it backwards. Let's start at the phone and work backwards. How do we get to where we want to be?
What do you want to do with the business, Drew?
Oh, really just continue to grow and scale the business. And what we've always talked about and what I'm 100% on board with is we don't want to be the biggest. That's not our goal. But we want to be extremely well at what we do. And that could be the processes, that could be, return clients. I just want to build a legacy to where I'm flexible, have a good process, and committed to each and every one of our clients. I think committed is a big one for me.
You guys have a great PDA. And that's probably the greatest report card you could ever have in scaling and growing your business. Because to your point, hey, you can have 100 people and do $10 million. It's not a high PDA.
Yeah.
So to your point, don't ever lose sight of the training. Don't ever lose sight of really reaching out and asking for help. I mean, meeting with Dale and Tony for breakfast tomorrow. God, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
Go visit other offices too.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal what you'll learn from other people. And I dare say, sometimes you'll learn what not to do. I'm interested in your relationship. There's not a lot of people that can work for their father. I couldn't. I was under the guidance that when I went to work for my father, I could work 20% less than anybody else. And he was under the guidance that his son was going to work 20% harder than everybody else. We had a 40% gap. It wasn't healthy. So what makes your relationship work in this environment?
Yeah. Listen, I think we're best friends. I consider my dad my best friend. And to have that working relationship also on the personal side, it really just, it means a lot. And also growing the business, knowing that he trusted in me to start it from the beginning with him. That's something I don't take for granted. And quite frankly, I wake up every day and I don't want to let him down. So that's where my drive comes. And I would say that, I'm probably the one who works 20% harder than him because I want to not only impress him, but continue to learn and grow. So when, there is the day where he's no longer in the business, hopefully I can continue to give that mentorship to another individual.
Incredible, humble answer.
Yeah.
I mean, Gordon, you got to be proud.
No doubt. And listen, we have a very tight knit family. I think a lot of that was from our retail days because we cocooned. We moved so often that it was a family unit first, and it remains that way today. So even my daughter, we're interested in the business. She has a wonderful job in corporate. She's doing phenomenal. She's very proud of us, which is goes a long way. And I think for Drew and I mean, we, there's a unique ability for us to turn it on or turn it off. And it's, there's no hard feelings because if he calls me and starts talking about Georgia football, but I'm right in the middle of something, I'm like, not now. There's no question. There's no debate. There's no, let's get to, it is, and I tell him all the time that, we have to understand there are times that have the personal relationship and the business relationship. Now, we have a lot of fun. We laugh all the time. We are very close. I was very fortunate to be the best man in Drew's wedding. But I think that his mom has a lot to do with this too. So, we've been at the family for a long time, and it's just, there's just that brutal honesty as we get in, and we keep each other's ego in check. When we're doing extremely well, Drew will remind me that the best time to make a business development call is right after a placement because you're feeling good and you're feeling confident and you got all this energy going. But at the same time, he's very complimentary. He's harder on himself than I could ever be, which, at times I have to pull him out of that and be like, okay, this is a victory. Can we celebrate it for just 10 minutes? So there's a good ebb and flow to how.
Why? What a great relationship. So glad to hear that. So starting with you, Gordon, what do you do to unwind?
It truly is family first. So if we can vacation together, if we can go to dinner together, we're very fortunate to have kids on 30 minutes of both sides of us. So we're kind of still central for now. But we love in the summer, we love to get on the water together. So we're on the boat a lot. That's kind of where we unwind and we can all enjoy. I love the big green egg and being able to find something that smells delicious from that standpoint. And, some of the vices, my wife would prefer this not be, but I really enjoyed a nice cigar.
So Drew, we've got to escape somehow. Aside from the family part of it, what the mom and dad part of the family, what do you do to let go?
I played collegiate golf, so that was something that, and the reason part-time for the first couple of years, I continued to chase my dream, had the opportunity to do that. Quickly found out it was not easy, not as easy as I thought it would be. So I'm glad I had Quest as, part-time there, but I still love getting out there, just to the golf course. It helps me clear my mind, still have that competitive spirit, whether it's in business or out of business. I think I'm stuck with that forever, but love getting out there, playing 9, 18, 30 minutes, 4 hours, however long I can get out there. That's definitely how I unwind.
But what's your handicap?
No, I'm scratch.
Really?
So.
Wow, that's really good. Usually when I ask that, people will be in the low 70s, and I'm good for that in a 9-hole putt-putt course.
True.
That's good. I mean, I can see where going to pace-setter trips or something like that, people are going to want you on their team.
We'll see. We'll see. Go to the highest bidder.
There you go. That's the right attitude. What happens tomorrow? Say something you've learned a lot. And Gordon, actually, I'm going to challenge you with this question. If you were to go back 7 years ago, what would you tell your younger self about getting into this business?
I think that what I would lean into is that there's two parts to this business in my mind. There's the business part of it, where you have to set up the strategy, the processes, the financials, the different pieces. And then there's the actual doing part. So the tactical part, so the vision and strategy. I would do the strategy a little bit different, right? So understanding the business, and I tell this story all the time. I was on one of these calls with a group of small business owners, not necessarily recruiting firms, but just small businesses as we were picking new ideas. And one of the owners was talking about his P&L. And I went, oh, I haven't looked at my P&L in 7 months. And then I went, oh, how do you make a P&L? And so it was, coming through big companies, large retailers, I would walk in on the third Thursday of the month and my admin would have all the P&Ls for the different territories printed. She could read a P&L as well as anybody. She would highlight it with a cover sheet with all of my conference calls and the times to speak with the leaders, and already who highlighted what I should speak to. So it was built in, but that was something that we had developed. Here it's that how to run a business, how to be an entrepreneur. I could have spent more time and probably sped our learning curve up quite extensively had I spent more time on the running the business instead of working in the business.
Interesting. Drew, what was the hardest thing about you ramping up in the business?
Listening. I think, especially starting out, assuming I had all the answers. So it was really that learning curve of, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So let's use it that way. And then really just not being afraid to ask questions. There was a point in time where Gordon and I sat across the desk from each other, and I got to listen to every single call and every marketing call, candidate call, whatever that looked like. And I just had the ultimate resource. I had the option to pick his brain. And I think that helped. And that's one of the big things I picked up on, was just listen first. And silence isn't a bad thing, is really what it came down to.
What's your favorite question, Gordon?
What's the feedback that you've been given at some point during your career that has stuck with you today?
What do you do with that?
It lets me see it about a person, right? And it's just because it tells you about how they've accepted feedback, how they've taken feedback and developed themselves as leaders, how they've evolved. Because it is, you get 2 very distinct things. So it's like, oh my God, let me tell you this. This was 2017. I was sitting at breakfast with my, so it's very, very specific. And those are the people that get me excited. Or it's I've gotten a lot of good feedback. So it's interesting to see people take feedback, and it has such a negative outlook, feedback. But coaching, right? Coaches give feedback all the time. And even the top professionals in the world have coaches. So someone has to be able to see you from outside of yourself.
Wow, that's great. So, Drew, what's one piece of advice you would give somebody that's gone through exactly what you did? And I did, by the way. I grew up racing motorcycles, got out of high school, never spent a day in college, got out of high school, decided I was going to go make my fortune racing motorcycles, decided after 2 or 3 years of not eating that probably wasn't the right profession for me, and got into retail, spent 15 years in retail. And I tripped into this business. And the one definition I've got for this business is, it's a gift, don't abuse it.
Mm.
What's the piece of advice you would give somebody that's just out of college, wants to get into this business? What's the most direct piece of advice you could give?
probably something around just find your passion. When I first started, I was hesitant. I didn't want to sit behind a desk and be on the phone all day. I'm more of a face-to-face interact, that type of interaction. And I learned, even though it's over the phone, you can still have those relationships. At times it may be harder, but I really found the passion around relationship building, and that's what recruiting is. It's all about relationship building. And that's where my true passion lies. So that's what I would say is just find your passion and really chase after it.
Drew, what's a question you'd like to ask of me?
If you could go back, being in my shoes, what would you tell me as a future leader? I've had the chance to go through Next Gen and they give their advice, but as someone who currently runs a successful business that's not my dad, what would you share for a future leader?
Fight emotional involvement.
Yeah.
Whether it's setting up an interview, whether it's closing a deal, the decisions aren't ours.
Good.
Our job is really, really simple. Introduce two people, facilitate a process. The hardest thing in the world is not being emotionally attached to it.
Good.
And so that would be, I guess, the answer that I would give you. Gordon, same question.
I think for me is what's been the key to your longevity? Because you can have success, but that doesn't mean it's over a long period of time. You've been very successful over a long period of time. What's the key?
Never made it about me. I was a competitor. That's why I raced motorcycles, because if I won, it was my fault. If I lost, it was my fault. It was never the bike's fault. I competed constantly in this business and never focused on the dollars. Realized that I'm not part of the decision of anything through here. Therefore, I needed to always look at it as a facilitation.
Right.
And it starts being on the telephone, getting two people together.
No, that's perfect. I love that.